McDonald and John McMullen here on Birds 365. We appreciate everybody who's already streamed in today. Johnny Mac, I think I saw the number of people streaming in actually hit 4 digits. We had surely never gotten to 1,000 people watching at any one time, and we did today. So we thank everybody who already streamed in. You could do us a solid. You guys are taking care of you here, getting prepped for the Super Bowl. You know, you can go ahead and hit that like button, right? And give us a little love leading up to the Super Bowl. That would be great.
I'm going to take credit for it, even though it's the Eagles, Jody. But we cracked. Now, we get many more on demand. We get, quite a few. And thank you to all the listeners out there. But, I think we set a record for live viewing.
May very well have. I've never seen us get over 1,000 before live viewing. So thanks to everybody who checked on in. And there's one other guy I think we have to thank from an Eagle going to the Super Bowl perspective today. And we just kind of questioned him. And John talked about his reporting on the Eagles' interest in other quarterbacks during the offseason. And I think McMullen is exactly on it. He's certainly knows and has his sources, and any 2020 hindsight of, they never really had interest in Russell Wilson and or Deshaun Watson. All right, you cling to that, okay? You want to believe that. You don't want to see anything downside about the Eagles this week. Well understood. Keep it all positive. Just put that out of your brain. But John's right. That happened. We got to give Howie Roseman props here. We know Nick Sirianni should be Coach of the Year candidate. We know Jalen Hurts came this close to winning an MVP, and he's got a face-off against Patrick Mahomes, the guy who's probably going to take down the award. And again, much like yesterday's results, Nick Sirianni coaching circles around Kyle Shanahan. Jalen Hurts is going to get a chance to outplay the guy who's going to win the MVP, so we'll see how that plays itself out. But think about the 12 months that Howie Roseman has had. It was only 12 months ago that the Eagles were walking off the field having been beaten down the same way they beat down their 2 playoff opponents this year by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in Tampa. 9-7, feel good. Hey, we got it going in the right direction season under rookie head coach Nick Sirianni. But it was a 9-7 team that got beat down in the postseason. And now they're 2 weeks away from playing in the Super Bowl. The Hassan Reddick signing, the trade for A.J. Brown, the C.J. Gardner-Johnson signing right before the season, trade with New Orleans, the additions of Sue and Linval. It just has gotten better as the year has gotten on. From the end of the season to the first foray of free agency to the trades that needed to be made around the draft, adding A.J. Brown, to the in-season, all of a sudden, Jordan Davis goes down. Oh, you can run against the Eagles. We better get some help in the middle of the line. And he gets Linval Joseph and Dominican Sue off the scrap heap to come in and contribute. Other than, and we'll whisper it, he did try and get Russell Wilson and Deshaun Watson. Other than that, what the hell has Howie Roseman done wrong? He is like a magic man this last 12 months putting this team together. And I think, just remember, again, you got to turn back history a little bit. It's not all that long ago that Chip Kelly kicked him to the corner and said, no, I need charge of everything. I need to make all the decisions. And Jeffrey Lurie was both foolish enough to give Chip the power, but smart enough to say, hey, Howie, please stay with the organization. We'll figure out something for you to do. Yeah. Feel free to go learn from other general managers in other sports across the globe to make yourself a better general manager. But I still love you, Howie. So if you'd be so kind as to just stick around, you never know. Maybe you'll get back into the big chair someday. Man, this is a phenomenal story that the Eagles are going through.
Yeah, I mean, this guy, and what some of the biggest heat I've ever taken was, when I would say Howie Roseman's a top 10 GM before all this started and everything kind of fell into place, I would get killed for it. But it's about, and this year kind of disproves my theory almost, because everything he's touched has turned to gold practically. But that doesn't usually happen. And if you think about all the dominoes that have to fall, and we just talked about the quarterback, but think about wide receiver. If the original plan works, and you got Christian Kirk, and Jacksonville doesn't overpay him, you get a really good player. We've had a great season in Jacksonville, but you don't get A.J. Brown. We talked about safeties, you and I, leading up to the draft. You and I both love Kyle Hamilton, who had a really good rookie season in Baltimore. And maybe long-term, he turns into the superstar we think he was going to be coming out of Notre Dame. We talked a lot about free agent safeties. They got to get a safety. We talked about our old buddy with Jaquiski Tartt. Well, Jaquiski Tartt used to start for the San Francisco 49ers. If even he showed up and played maybe a modicum well in training camp, maybe they don't go trade for Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. All these dominoes have to fall into place, and they've all fallen into place perfectly. And by the way, you don't have to pay the quarterback, so you can do these things and pay A.J. Brown $100 million. That all changes when Jalen Hurts gets his extension. So all these things kind of come together, and it's been a dream season for Howie Roseman, Executive of the Year, deservedly so. It's not always going to be like this, though, but he's always going to make good decisions. Sometimes they don't work out, because that's the NFL. I say to this day, and people laugh at me, and I will continue to say to this day, the Eagles made a good decision on Carson Wentz when they signed him to an extension. It was a good contract at the time. We all thought he was a good player. He fell apart, but we don't have to re-legislate as to why. There's many reasons. Everything from his psyche to his, if you want to say work ethic, not working on his mechanics, to the injuries, the knee injury, the concussion, the back injury, all of it sort of a cocktail of things went wrong. But in the moment, that was the right decision. It just didn't work out. He's a good GM. He's always been a good GM. Now people will recognize it. And guess what? When it becomes more difficult, they'll hate him again, but that's just part of the job.
Because he's got his work cut out for him with the Eagles contract situations going into next year. He's going to get, if the Eagles win in 13 days, you're going to get to celebrate. We're going to have another parade. Kelsey's going to find a costume to wear. Howie's going to get a lot of props, as well he should. But then he's going to have to go back to work, and it's not going to be easy for him.
By the way, I just thought of another one. Rewind back before Christian Kirk. They had a deal in place to trade for Calvin Ridley.
That's true.
Who is a good player, and maybe he'll come back and be a good player, and maybe he'll turn into a great player. But all these things, they were trying to get a receiver. They couldn't get it. Allen Robinson, another guy, they couldn't get it. They failed on so many different avenues. In the case of Ridley, it wasn't their fault. And to Atlanta's credit, they didn't leave the Eagles holding the bag. And then they had to turn to, well, let's go get A.J. Brown. I mean, sometimes the stars align, Joe.
And I will give Howie even further credit. You're right. In the moment, Carson Wentz, what he achieved, the status of quarterbacks in the league, the Eagles did what they had to do at that time, and they signed it. You get to look at it in 2020 hindsight and go, man, how did they give him that kind of money? It doesn't matter. In the moment, they were right. But maybe the most impressive thing of all was when Howie said, all right, screw it. Even though we're going to take the biggest debt.
Well, that's Jeffrey. I'm not giving him credit. That's Jeffrey Lurie. Because Jeffrey Lurie has got to approve. You remember Andrew Brandt. You were right about this, Jody. Andrew and I were wrong. Nobody had ever done that before. Nobody had ever in the history of the National Football League signed off on that much dead money. That was a Jeffrey Lurie.
Yeah, but Howie had to bring it to Jeffrey for him to say, okay, right, fine. But if I were the general manager, I don't know that I want to go to the owner and go, yeah, oh, by the way, I want you to eat this contract, the biggest contract eating in the history of the National Football League. Yes, Jeff, please take the egg on your face as the owner and eat this contract. He did it. Now, to Jeffrey's credit as well, we'll share the credit. Oh, Jeffrey absolutely deserves credit. But Howie brought it to him and said, yeah, this kind of stinks, but we really need to do it, boss. And he goes, okay.
Yeah, but you know what, Jody? Look, I give Howie all the credit in the world. I'm the guy who said it was a top 10 GM when I was getting shouted down by reporters in this fucking city. Excuse my language. I go Jordan Mailata on Twitter before all this happened. You know, Carson kind of forced himself out. The original plan, the Eagles were going to run it back with Carson Wentz if he agreed to mea culpas, and you know, might have been a competition, as Les pointed out. They might have said, all right, you were so bad you were going to have to compete with Jalen. But their original plan was they were going to run it back and give it one more chance. And only when he said, no, I don't want anything to do with this, he was going to make it a big problem, did the Eagles ship. And ultimately, Jeffrey Lurie approved the largest dead cap hit in NFL history. And, you know, it only takes one. Now everybody else, now every GM, because that's what you want to do, right? You don't want to sit and stew for 5 years in mediocrity because you made a mistake. If you have an owner that says, all right, we screwed that one up, let's turn the page, that's very, very helpful.
Screwed the pooch, and both Jeffrey Lurie and Howie Roseman admitted to it, took the egg on their face short term, and are now reaping the benefits off to the Super Bowl in 13 days against the Kansas City Chiefs. He's John McMullen. I'm Jody McDonald. Mac and Mac on Birds 365. Coming up next, we'll get our Monday Maven. That would be Chris Franklin. He's been good enough to jump in with us on the day after Eagle games all year long. He will do so again next here on